Agencies Drinking Beer is brought to you by Proposify, software that helps you deliver beautiful proposals in the cloud and close more deals.
Welcome to the 64th episode of Agencies Drinking Beer. On today's show, we're talking to Brad Flowers from Bullhorn Creative about how he started his agency in an economic downturn, how to improve operations, and the effect knowing your values has on hiring. Well, I'm very pleased to have another co-host on today who's not Kevin, named Jen Faulkner.
Hi, Kyle. Thanks for
Jen.
having me back on the podcast.
Yeah, it's been too long, I'd say.
I usually shrink when you come around looking for volunteers to be on the podcast with you.
I know, you're so timid. So timid.
Such a wallflower. I don't like to take all the spotlight. Spread it around.
That's right. Because, yeah, you do take a little bit too much of the spotlight most days.
Oh, well.
No.
Hard being a star.
It's very quiet when you're not in the office, and I mean that in a good way. Because we hear your infectious laughter, we hear the bell ringing. It just doesn't seem the same without you.
You hear me typing.
Yeah.
Because I type like I'm angry
with
all the
two
time.
fingers.
Yeah, exactly. I type like an angry two-fingered menace.
Angry Two-Fingered Menace. All right, that's your new nickname.
Angry two-fingered menace?
Yeah.
Awesome.
ATFM. ATFM. That's your nickname. Nobody will know what it means.
I'm going to put it on my LinkedIn profile.
Excellent. So we have a very interesting interview coming up with Brad Flowers.
Which I got excited because I thought maybe he was related to Brendan Flowers,
I don't
lead
know
singer
who
of
that
The
is.
Killers, and Kyle, music fan extraordinaire, where I feel like I don't know any band after 1993. And anyway, he didn't get my
I don't
joke.
know. I don't really listen to The Killers much. Actually, when I was in Dreamforce about a year ago in San Francisco, the Foo Fighters were playing and the Killers were playing as well. And they were on different stages, but Killers was like wrapping up and then Foo Fighters was starting. And I just skipped the Killers concert and I just went right to the Foo Fighters stage, went right up front because I didn't want to go see them. They were just playing them on the big screen anyway, so why do I have to be in the crowd?
Yeah, I guess.
That's how much I don't care
choice.
about the Killers.
Jeez.
Are they really good? Maybe I should give them a chance.
I feel like listeners should write in now and say how good the Killers are.
What's that
now,
popular
I'm talking
song
about
they've got?
I'm talking about like their first album. I'm not. I don't know as much what they've done. Like it was 10 years ago now that album came out.
What's that song I hear on the radio? Is they still playing that popular one?
They had a few hits. I don't know. I love that album. Don't Make Me Sing. You know,
Yeah, but sing it. Sing their hits. I want Jen singing the Killers' greatest hits.
Okay, let's just move on. Google them on.
All right, we'll do that.
Jenny was a friend of mine, so come on.
We go. Yes, we got Jen singing. Amazing. We're gonna have a little more listeners now.
The reason I'm nervous about singing is because I'm one of those people who gets the lyrics all wrong. So yeah.
I struggle with that as well because I play open mic usually every second Tuesday at the local pub, and I have a very small repertoire that I stick to because it's not. I know a lot of songs. I know how to play the main riffs, but I just can't remember the lyrics, so that's always a struggle. And I actually want to play 1979 by the Smashing Pumpkins the next time I play.
Oh.
And it's
You gotta
really
learn the
hard to
words.
remember the lyrics because there's a lot of weird. It's not a hard song to play on guitar, but the singing is lyrically he just puts syllables in weird places you wouldn't think.
Yeah, because you kind of need it to be a little intuitive for people to remember. But yeah. I have massacred. I have been singing songs at the top of my lungs at home, thinking like, wow, I'm really singing it. And then my boyfriend will be like, those are totally not the words at all.
Yeah. Yeah, I bet you lyrics too.
But you know what? Don't rain on my parade.
But you know what, Jen? Everybody makes mistakes. And that brings us to a topic that you wrote about just
that was
recently.
an amazing segue.
Thank you.
Yeah, I wrote
Thank
a
you.
topic or a blog post recently called "So You Made a Mistake: 5 Steps to Save the Day and Your Business." And actually, I think that this is something not just in business, but just in life in general that people aren't very good at. Well, we're good at making mistakes. We all make mistakes. We've all made them. I've made them. You've made them. Everybody does. But I always find that where things go worse is when you don't react to the problem. And this is classic PR stuff as well, and we've seen it again and again on both the micro and macro level, as you said, on political stage, in business, in your personal life. I just find if you just say you're sorry and start to take steps to remedy the problem, it can really turn it around. And the reverse is true, where if you react poorly to a mistake, sometimes it can be like a really small mistake, but you react poorly to it, and suddenly the mistake is like, you just murdered a litter of puppies or something like that. Like, it just blows way out of proportion. So your recovery is really important. So I outlined, and also I just want to say, if you haven't read this post, and it's okay, I know you're not all reading my posts, even though you should be.
That's why we talked about them on the podcast.
Is in the post, I did this little collage of what I like to call the I effed up face, because every time, I'm a little bit of a political junkie, watch a lot of news and stuff, and every time, and especially with men, that there's a screw up, and Elliot Spitzer and all these men, when they're on stage and they're having to admit they screwed up or someone's asking, they all do this line thing with their mouth. So if you go on my blog post,
Do you know? Yeah.
they do this line face. Can I do it? I can't. I don't know how to do it. Yeah,
I can probably do it. But, it's just a weird coincidence. I just saw a body language expert on CNN. I was like binging on CNN when I was up in Cape Breton just recently. It was the only thing that was on. And there was a body language expert talking about the debates, and Hillary Clinton made that face during the debate. And she made it after Donald Trump said something about her having poor judgment or something. And she kind of made that like,
yeah.
And he said it has, something to do with being uncomfortable, being angry. And that's sort of like hiding your lips is basically something we all do. Maybe we don't even know about it when we're in a particular situation like that.
Yeah, it's not a contrite face. This is the thing from a body language perspective. It's not contrite. It's not saying I'm sorry. It's like you're biting your tongue from saying the wrong thing, which is probably smart, but you need to just
I think I've made that face for sure. Maybe not like after making a mistake, but
I'm not saying I don't hold my face in a certain way, but they all seem to, I don't know, it's like upside down smiley every time.
Well, it's quite the frown.
But the steps when you make a mistake are, the very first thing is to admit it, because nothing drives people more crazy when there's been a screw up is somebody not admitting it's a screw up. And it's okay to, it's not saying you're going to be liable, but just admit there's been a problem. Something bad happened. And the faster you do it, the better, because if you leave a lot of time between something was announced, just think about all the, on the news when you hear, it was found that some company was negligent in their baby products, and now a whole bunch of babies are sick. And we contacted the company for comment, and by news time, we haven't heard anything. Well, that just instantly, everybody's like, they're guilty. Or you can just imagine they're scrambling behind the scenes and freaking out, right?
Yeah. Or even worse, they're trying to suppress the information and keep it from getting out, in which case we have the Streisand effect.
What's
Have
the
you ever heard
Streisand effect? No.
The Streisand effect, I just had to Google it to make sure I had it right. So apparently there was footage in some video on the internet at some point. It was maybe 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and it was Streisand's Malibu house. Somebody was taking a video. I can't remember what it was for, but it was a relatively unknown video, and there was an image of Barbra Streisand's house in Malibu on it. and her people tried to keep it from getting out. This was 2003, and it was an attempt to suppress the photographs. So basically, the more they tried to suppress it with like cease and desist letters and all this kind of stuff, then the more the public got wind of it, and now it's like a famous image. So the Streisand effect is the phenomenon by where the harder you try to suppress information from getting out, the more popular it becomes, the more well-known, and the more people talk about it.
It's true, because journalists are going to dig deeper. All the conspiracy theorists are going to just be going crazy trying to come up with the most bizarre reason why it's happening. And everyone's just imagining you're in the boardroom burning piles of paper and smashing hard drives so that the information doesn't come out. So just admit there's a problem. And even if you don't know exactly what you're going to do about it yet, get to it and just say there's a problem. And then once that you've admitted there's a problem, you really need to apologize. And I don't know why people have a problem apologizing. In your personal life, in your professional life, saying you're sorry. And I know there's this Canadian stereotype that we say sorry all the time. I mean, they're saying sorry, and then they're saying sorry like you mean it. They're saying sorry like your kids say sorry when they did something, and they friggin' don't mean it, right? Exactly.
Do you remember when our Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, Elbowgate? This was like maybe 6 months ago, where he accidentally elbowed a member of Parliament. The opposition made a big deal out of it, and he like apologized almost too much, but he was like so sincere about it, even though he really didn't do anything. He kind of accidentally elbowed somebody, and like was so over the top in a way, like apologizing. Nobody talks about it now. It like had zero impact on his political career.
He handled that so well. And on the other side, they exaggerated it so much that it ended up being like the victims were the people at fault as opposed to him. I mean, it was an accident, and they were all behaving inappropriately in the House of Commons that day and just out of control. But he handled it well. He apologized right away. He immediately, even when he realized he'd done it, he left the room to go apologize to the person he had accidentally elbowed. That's the way to handle it. He didn't start going on about how they overreacted, even though they did. He admitted there was a problem, and he apologized right away, and he didn't put any conditions around the apology. It's really important to do that. Yeah.
I know we have to move to the interview soon, but I just wanted to ask you, the hard thing in an agency environment, I'm getting all these flashbacks now, pardon me, is that when the client is mad at you for something that is totally their fault, like you told them 5 times at the beginning of the project and throughout that they need to have a content or something by this date, or you can't meet a deadline, they don't do it, you don't meet the deadline, and they're mad at you. What do you do in that situation? Because I've had this so many times that, Headspace was that, like, it was totally their fault, like not at all our fault. And it's really hard to apologize in those situations. So
that's when first of all, that goes back to, I think, another post about making sure scope creep doesn't happen, and about really making sure that you have all the conditions of the project laid out so that you can refer to it, because it will cover your butt later, and you can refer to it. And I think in those situations, you can still say something like, I'm sorry that you feel that way. I'm sorry that it's turned out this way. However, and you feedback what your conditions were for working on the project. Because I don't think you should apologize for something that you didn't do. You have to handle it delicately. But at the end of the day, if you were clear about what everybody's responsibilities were and the client didn't do it, you don't have to wear that. And that can drive me crazy. On the flip side of that, sometimes it can be easy to blame clients for your own problems. Like a client's upset, and it can be easy to be like, oh, well, the client did this or that. And it's not necessarily their fault. Maybe they didn't understand. But if you were clear about laying things out, I don't think you should have to wear that. It's kind of like what Brad talks about. There has to be honesty and decisiveness at a certain point. You got to draw a line in the sand, and don't be a doormat.
Yes. Good life lesson overall.
And now, let's move on to the interview with Brad Flowers!
I'd like to welcome Brad Flowers to the show today. Brad is the founding partner at Bullhorn Creative, a branding agency in Lexington, Kentucky. He currently oversees operations and apparently talks too much, which we're totally okay with here. Welcome to the show, Brad.
Hey, thanks, Kyle. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, we can't have people on the podcast who don't talk.
That's
No.
Cricket.
That's kind
You've
of
got a
boring.
lot to live up to here.
Get talking.
Right.
Okay, well, tell me why you started Bullhorn. Do you call it creative? Yes, Bullhorn Creative, sorry. Tell me why you started Bullhorn Creative.
Yeah. I started, let's see, it was the fall of 2008. And here the economy was just about at its worst and no one was hiring. And so I needed a job. And so we started a company. That was basically the rationale.
I was just going to say, you're like the bravest man in America. You started a company in 2008. That's awesome.
Yeah. And bravery and stupidity are like so close.
And if you need a job, it's better to just make one for yourself, right?
Yeah. So it's funny. I never really set out to be an entrepreneur, nor did I really think of myself as that, but it happened through a series of decisions and I couldn't be happier. I really love what we do. And I'm lucky to work with a bunch of folks that are smarter than me and do work that's, meaningful and fun.
Yeah, I know somebody else here locally, Jeff White from Kula Partners, and it was the same thing. He was actually laid off from an agency. He was a designer and then started his own one, and they've been going for like 10 years and really successful. So it's amazing how just sort of getting pushed into the deep end of the pool can sometimes make you fight harder to survive and then end up thriving, right?
Yeah, I think so. You don't have much of a choice.
So, I mean, how did you go about getting, you're sort of, the economy's bad, you decide to start your own business. I know that's been a while ago, we're on 8 years or something, but as far back as you can remember, how did you really get it going? Like, how did you go about finding your first clients and start hiring people?
Sure. We were pretty connected to the nonprofit community here. There was a community foundation sent my original partner and I, Griffin, to a conference in Detroit. And there we heard some folks from other kind of Rust Belt cities, like I think it was Pittsburgh and Cleveland. And we heard them talking about how the dominant narrative about their cities didn't really equate to how they experienced their cities. And there was something about that really resonated with us. We thought the idea that maybe we could elevate the quality of design and the quality of work that was coming out of Central Kentucky, and help change the dominant narrative that was out in the community at large. And so we started off that sounds good, but the reality is then you have to go do something and find someone to hire you. So I think, like a lot of folks, we started off with friends and family. We really would do just about anything. We didn't really start off as a branding agency per se. We didn't really know what a branding agency was. So we thought we would be more, we originally actually thought we would do more events sort of stuff. I was doing citywide bicycling events and he was doing a music event. But turns out no one wanted to pay us to do that. So we had to do other stuff. And one funny thing, one of the first things our first like big paying gig that we got, there's an event here that happens every spring, and it's a fundraiser for the College of Architecture. And they go into a raw space, like a warehouse space, and create a big party. And then the money that's raised goes to several nonprofits in the community. Well, at the last minute, their bar vendor backed out. And so they called us and they're like, we don't actually know what you guys do. We can't really tell, but could you get a liquor license? And so our first real paying gig, we rented a U-Haul and bought $200 of booze and sold booze.
You got to do what it takes.
It's been downhill from there. We just
perfect start. What a way to kick off the business, eh?
Yeah, right. You can imagine in the middle of the night, sitting in the back of a box truck with a headlamp on, just counting all of these filthy dollar bills, just one after the other. It was, it was an interesting start to a business career.
I love that the dollar bills were filthy.
Oh, they were filthy because it's a costume party, and it's like tends to be very scantily clad. So people were pulling these things out of everywhere. It was just horrifying.
I thought you just meant they were like covered in booze or something.
Yeah.
No,
Not
your hands were gray. That was rough.
You kind of start off doing everything, which a lot of agencies do, but a lot of them have a hard time making the transition to an agency that is specific about who they are, what they do,
right,
and what clients they take on. A lot of them just never make that switch, so then they're always a generalist, and they're always kind of just feast or famine, taking on whoever will hire them. How did you guys make that transition over to the other side?
Yeah. I was just thinking about it yesterday. I gave a little talk, and that was one of the questions. And I think, I don't ever think we actually made the transition. It was a series of small decisions that ultimately ended up in big changes. I can't say there were real points where we pivoted. Over time, we kind of thought through, and we sought advice of again, smart folks. And we were keeping track of the projects and what was profitable. And we were starting to realize that the things that were profitable were also the things that we were the best at. And so slowly over time, we started we're saying, okay, we won't accept projects under this size. We won't accept just website projects, and we won't accept just video projects. So over time, it kind of smaller and smaller decisions each year as we reflected on the year and what went well and what didn't. We slowly narrowed to now we really accept, larger branding projects that are multifaceted, and hopefully we're solving pretty complex problem for our clients. That's the best situation.
And your role is mainly in operations, or do you have a hand in any of
that? It's been a really interesting year for me personally. It's the first. I've worked a lot on the client work. My background is literature, so I got into this thinking I would write funny ad copy, and it turns out I don't do any of that at all. So over the last year, I've really transitioned away from working on client work to really working on the business, which has been a big shift. And but it's also been really exciting. I kind of challenge driven, and I like things to change up. So it's been really fun to think about how our processes work, where are we going to be in a few years? Are our financial systems in order? How do we manage projects appropriately? Can we start to predict cash flow a little better? Some of those typical problems that agencies have. So I kind of work, I guess working on operations, I just mean I work across from, I go to a lot of sales stuff. I still pitch work. And then I help with some strategy on the brand strategy, and then sometimes clients, and just because of the nature, there are 12 of us, I still log into our accounting software and occasionally receive invoices or send invoices. So I kind of work across the whole business, I guess.
So were you surprised that you've enjoyed that change? Because it sounds like you've enjoyed the change, but if you started out thinking you were going to write clever lines, and then this is quite a difference. I always find those kind of changes interesting, and what it reveals about you that maybe you didn't know before.
Yeah, it was a big surprise because, like I mentioned earlier, I never got into this thinking I would be a business person, but I really love it, and it's surprising, but it's really challenging. You have to balance multiple demands, figure out what needs the most attention and when. But I think big challenges like that also are meaningful, and it helps. I have a great team of folks to work with. There are 5 partners here now, so we've grown and changed quite a bit, and so I have a great support network, I guess, as well.
I think that's a challenging transition that a lot of people who go into business for themselves face, because most people I know, especially in the agency world here in our city, they opened their agency because they loved doing what they did. So if it's copywriting or they were creative director or they were a designer or whatever, they loved that. And as you said, it wasn't that they were like, pure business people who just loved starting and running a business. And I've seen where that transition is difficult because they got into the business and they thought, okay, I'm going to get to do my own kind of work and choose the kind of clients I want. And then faced with having to deal with operations, like listing all those things you were talking about, whether it's HR or the business strategy or sales and all that stuff, that sometimes they end up not doing the thing that they love, and they're busy worrying about like, okay, well, where's their lease on our server or whatever, right? Like, and then that could be hard for them.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think, I think the great thing about business is you can kind of do whatever you want. And so if you're a freelance designer and you love freelance designing, you don't ever have to hire anyone and you can just keep doing the work you want and running your business that way. But for us, that's not the way we ended up deciding to go. So it required a bit more of a switch for me. And it's something that turns out I really love doing it. And I think the biggest piece of advice I have, and the best thing that's ever happened to me, and it kind of happened again on an accident, I have great fortune, is that I was invited to participate in a peer group of other people who were running businesses. And the other guys, or the other folks rather, were the businesses were much more established and larger and more sophisticated. So it's if there's someone out there that's in this position and is thinking about that transition, I can't recommend that highly enough. There are several different organizations that connect peers to, I assume, in most every city. And that's been awesome for me.
That's a good takeaway, I think, for the listeners, is to have mentors around you who are more experienced, who can kind of show you the ropes in the business that you may not know already.
Yeah.
One thing that I wanted to ask you was, I think the hard thing is when you start a business because you want to, create great work and you're proud of the work that you do, and then you find sometimes, like you said, your best work was your most profitable, which I think is actually pretty rare, because sometimes in order to get the really good work where you've got a lot of say in what goes out and the client trusts you, or the client just, isn't really paying enough to, to put up too much of a fight, sometimes you end up losing money on those projects, but it's great for your portfolio and it's great to show off what you've done. But then it seems like the more money comes into the project, now you're dealing with committees, or you're dealing with really strong-headed clients who want it the way they want it, and they don't care, they don't trust you. It's really hard to balance that. I think everybody wants to know, how were you guys able to do that? Like, how is your best work your most profitable work?
I think it's. That's a good question. I guess I could just have a couple of anecdotes maybe that might help clarify. We were taking on larger, more complicated technical projects in kind of two different ways. We were doing some really interesting and I think really nice video work early on, and we were kind of taking steps up to where we were getting bigger and bigger projects, and we were finally getting kind of like these dream budgets. But then we realized that even with the budget that we hoped for, we still weren't able to make any money at the end of the day, that we were having a really hard time managing the projects, managing the creeping scope, managing subcontractors. And we had major, major cash flow problems when the people that we had to hire to execute needed to get paid before we got paid. And so it was creating a lot of business problems. And so I think if there was ever one big turning point decision, that was about 2.5 years ago. We decided to stop taking on just video projects by themselves, which at that point made up about 35 or 40% of our revenue. So it was a pretty huge decision. But it really paid off. In that next year, we were able to make up the gap of that 40% in just branding projects. And this still doesn't really answer your question. How that? I'm not exactly sure. I guess it's that we spend the most energy and time thinking about process, maybe, and so thinking about the process helps us manage the project more effectively, so that it's at the end of the day more profitable.
I think you did answer the question though, because when you guys enjoy doing video projects and they're probably fun to do, but they were presenting business problems that you had to solve. So you kind of had to take the disciplined approach to say, we'd like to have it all, but we can't. So if we have to sacrifice one, we'll sacrifice this. And I think, ultimately it's better that you stay in business and keep your team and keep everybody happy and employed than, just sort of stubbornly sticking to like, no, we need to do video projects. They make up 40% of our revenue. So you made the hard choice. That's what I took from that.
Yeah, it was certainly a hard choice, and it was stressful. And I wish I would have had a group to talk to at that point, because I think another great thing about having peers to communicate with is they've been in these kind of dark spots where you're waking up in the night. You have stress. But at the time you feel like you're the only one that's ever experienced that, and like you're a failure, and but when you talk to these folks, you realize almost everyone has these same stories, and they get through it. So that'd be another big plug for why you would want to find some people to be able to talk to, because when it's dark, having that support, I think, is invaluable.
Absolutely. I think when we're talking about operations, it inherently doesn't sound all that fun or interesting, but really it's such an important role to have one of the partners especially be an operations guy. And I'm sure you're a lot more than that and do a lot more. Like you said, you pitch work and involved in the sales process. But I've seen it so much in agencies, and even Kevin's and mine when we ran, is like I think we both tried together to keep an eye on operations, but there was nobody really kind of dedicated to it. And I think it's so important for an agency to have that role. Somebody like, you hate to think of the, what's his name? Jen Price from Mad Men.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Lane,
yeah.
Lane,
he
was so undervalued.
Getting rid of everyone's staplers and pens because they're costing too much. And all that.
Right.
But you kind of need that. And I want to know from you, because if anybody listening is struggling with operations at their agency, or they just don't know what they should be tracking, this is kind of long-winded, but I have a friend who runs an agency, and I asked him, like, how do they know that they're profitable on projects? And he said, I just feel it. I just feel it in my they don't track hours or anything.
He just feels it in his pocketbook.
Yeah, it's like, if I made money at the end of the month, then I guess the project was profitable. So I'm like, that's a nightmare.
Yeah.
What tips would you have for people who are kind of, flying by the seat of their pants that they should be keeping an eye on? Maybe it's business metrics or something they should be tracking or monitoring to make sure that they're.
Yeah, that's been a big shift for us this year too. As I've and I might have been a little misleading, say that I was overseeing operations. I'm kind of overseeing the whole ship. What we've ended up doing, which has been really helpful, is splitting the business into kind of three primary categories, which is like every business: sales, marketing, operations, and finance / HR. And so within operations, and this varies from business to business, we've split operations into two distinct functions. We have our creative output on one side, the actual work product that we make. And then on the other side of operations is client relationships. And we decided to split it up because we started looking at how our staff was organized and what their skills were, and there was zero overlap in those two areas. And so for us, it made sense to split it up. For some people, client relationships, that might be a sales function, but for us, it happens to be operations. And so there's a partner that's over each of those functions. There's one that's over, our creative director is over the creative, and then another partner is over the client stuff. And so it's been really good because I think the seat of your pants stuff, the problem that I see generally creeps up is all of us want a fun, cool workspace. And so, you don't really want a lot of hierarchy, and, but the problem is you end up with multiple people in charge of something. And then when two people are on the hook for something, it ends up being really easy to just say, oh, well, it didn't happen. That's no big deal. We'll kind of figure it out next time. So I think the most important thing is for us, the most valuable thing has been to go through and say, this is something that needs to happen. This is the person who's going to be accountable for it. These are the 5 things that person is going to be accountable for. And then that's how we schedule when we do our kind of quarterly feedback sessions with everybody. It's according to, are these still the 5 things you're accountable for? And then the goals for the next quarter are planned out in relation to those 5 accountability things.
Well,
that's a long way of answering it.
No, that's awesome. One thing I want to talk about before we wrap up the interview is about values and culture. That's something that that you're very passionate about and you've talked about.
Yeah.
Why are values important, I guess, and especially even, for a smaller business, a 12-person agency, why do you need to sort of go through the work of like figuring out what your values are and putting it out there for other people to see?
Sure. The main reason, there are two big reasons, I think. One is when you're small, I think it's probably at any size, but when you're small, it's especially important because one bad hire can really taint the whole office environment and can taint the work and can make life terrible. So going through and I think analyzing your values and figuring out what they are is super important so that then you can, through interview process or through just in general, how you talk about yourself, that it's really clear what sort of company you are and what will be expected. And for us, for example, we went through and we outlined kind of 3 pairs of core values. And this isn't a unique idea, but it's something that we've stuck to and that's been really helpful is in the interview process. We have questions oriented around each of these values to help get at whether this person is a good fit. Because as you mentioned earlier, it's easy to kind of say, well, it kind of just felt like it was a fit. Like when you were talking about financial stuff, I think we can also be a little bit vague like that on cultural stuff. And you think, well, it just feels like a cultural fit. But I think it helps to have a little bit more sophisticated way of deciding if it's actually a cultural fit. So we use it for hiring and also for like if, for example, if someone had to be, if a change had to happen, a staffing change, that would be a potential reason. That's how we kind of help analyze it. The second, I think, so one is personnel. I think it's essential. You need to attract the same sort of people that have kind of the same goals. The second is that hopefully if you put that out there publicly, people kind of get an idea of who you are and get an idea whether they want to do business with you or not. And so hopefully because of that, we get better, more qualified leads coming in the door that end up being stronger working relationships and putting out better work in a more streamlined fashion.
Yeah. I really like reading your values, and I think, did you write the values? Yeah, it looks like you wrote them.
Yeah.
So, such good writing. But do you mind taking us through what Bullhorn's core values are, and just maybe talking about how that impacts the culture at your company?
Sure. So we wanted to have 3 to 5 values, and since we couldn't do that, we had 3 pairs. So it's kind of cheating, but we can't, we can
squeeze in that 6th one.
Yeah, we kind of got there. But so one thing we've talked a lot about the whole time we've been doing Bullhorn is it's this concept of being able to hold 2 ideas in tension and kind of live with that tension. And so I think our values get that a little bit. And so, for example, the first one is empathy and honesty. And so we need people that are empathetic, because if you're not empathetic, it's hard. It's just hard to work with you. So, for example, if you're an account manager, you have sometimes pretty intense stress going between a creative or a designer maybe who has a really particular idea of what needs to happen and a client who maybe has a different idea. And so we need to have empathy kind of throughout that communication chain. So the designer has to be empathetic with the position that the account person is in, and also empathetic with the client, because we're really asking the client to make pretty major changes. So across the board, internally and externally, we need to be really empathetic. And but sometimes that can get a little soft, and maybe you can end up not standing up for yourself. And so I think we need honesty to balance empathy, so that we can say, when it's time to say, this is a goal we've set out, this particular idea reaches your goal, what you're suggesting is a bad idea because this, and this. And we need to have that honesty to be able to talk to clients and talk to each other to say, look, what you're doing right now isn't working towards the good of the company or the good of our clients.
I love
Go ahead, sorry.
honesty. And when I read the values, especially the part about clients, I think empathy obviously helps you internally work together, but in really about how we make clients do things they don't understand. And we often talk about this as clients come to agencies because they need help doing something, so they don't understand something. And oftentimes, as people who understand something, it can be easy to slide into being annoyed with clients. Because they don't understand. And same thing for us here at Proposify. Sometimes we're just so used to how our product works. And then customers are like, I don't know how to make a PDF. And it seems really simple to us or whatever, right? And we're like, oh my gosh. But if they don't understand it, they don't understand it. And by being more empathic, it helps us develop a better product that's going to connect with our customers and make it easy. And I think, especially in marketing and branding, which is something that is a little more esoteric in some ways for clients, it's really leading them on that path and helping them understand. And then the honesty part really wraps it up, because like you said, there's a point where you have to draw a line in the sand.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And for us specifically, and I think for you too, it has to do with, there's a quantity issue that's happening where we go through these branding projects 20 or 30 a year. And so for us, changing everything is totally normal. But for most of these folks that we're talking to, they may only do it once in their whole career.
Yeah.
So, it's being empathetic to their position, because that's a lot of stress, and, they don't want to screw it up. It's their business.
I really like the second one about dissatisfaction.
Yeah.
About noticing things that are broken in the world and wanting to change them. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, we really struggled with how to articulate that one, because we didn't want it to seem like, we didn't want it to seem like we were assholes, basically. So can we say that? Is that?
Yes.
Okay.
We already said ass today, so.
Yeah, I didn't even need to.
I'll start over in case that needs to get cut.
No, stick with asshole. You guys don't seem like assholes in this.
Okay, good. So yeah, we struggled with how to say that. So and again, I think that second one might have been how we ended up with these two pairs of words. So dissatisfaction is really important for us, and I think it's so integral to our culture that if you don't have that, you really can't get along at all. That may be like the most important one. And it's, every single project we want to find the next thing that's a little bit better. Or the work that we've done, we're always want to do a little bit better work. And that goes across everything, whether it's our office desks or whatever. We're constantly kind of messing with things. But dissatisfaction, I think, can go a couple of ways. One, you could kind of be, like the internet troll or something. Those people are dissatisfied, but they don't actually do anything about it. And so we wanted that second word, improvement, to show that the dissatisfaction is oriented towards progress, which is, I think, an essential way to think about it. We're not just complaining about the way things are, but we're oriented towards fixing the way things are.
I like when you say we are the princess who feels the damn pee under all those mattresses and has to get up and do something about it.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, that's very true.
And so
go ahead.
Sorry, did I cut you off?
No, I was just going to jump to the third one.
Okay, let's jump into the third one: creativity and decisiveness.
Yeah, this is, and as a branding agency, people might feel like that's something you don't have to say. But one of the things I've really realized as I've transitioned, if you heard someone saying they were transitioning away from writing maybe brand strategy and ad copy or whatever towards more of a thinking about the business more holistically, it sounds like you have to sacrifice some creativity. But what I'm realizing is that it's an immensely creative act to figure out how to organize a group of people around a certain goal and move into the future in a way that is sustainable financially and socially and ecologically and everything. So I guess the creativity is the point of that, was that no matter what you're going to do here, whether we're hiring someone to do accounting or whatever, we're going to expect you to approach your tasks with the required creativity. Just we think that it's an innate human thing and that everyone can contribute to the good work that we're doing. And again, I think it has to have a caveat, because you hear of the creative person who just like kind of infinitely noodles with things. And there's just nothing really helpful about that. Creativity requires parameters, and it requires decisiveness to make the transition from doing work to doing good work that gets pushed out into the world.
You hear about this a lot with directors of movies who, I think Peter Jackson had said that he would never stop making a movie.
Yeah.
The studio has to say, you're done. The deadline's here. We got to,
Right.
you know, otherwise he would just noodle and tweak little edits and, you know, do it forever. So, I mean, how do you, that's kind of a balancing act for you guys, is you're always, you know, you're dissatisfied in that you're kind of looking at making things better, but then at the same time, you just got to get it out there and see how it resonates with people.
Yeah. And these things you have to have you have to have the sophistication, I guess, to hold these in tension, which a lot of the current media discussions here, at least, it shows that a broad portion of the population aren't able to hold complicated ideas in tension with each other. I assume this isn't a politics show. Is that right?
You can talk about whatever you want.
We'll start with politics and then we'll talk about religion. How's that?
Sure.
Perfect.
We're pretty liberal up here in Canada. So.
Oh, good. Yeah, Kentucky is terrifying, unfortunately, right now.
Oh,
We're all terrified for you. We'll just leave it at that.
Yeah. We want people to move here and do good work with us, but at the same time, we're going to acknowledge that it's a terrifying place to live.
Yes.
But saying that on your, because one, to go back to you when you were talking about making these values and then really following through on them, I think that's where a lot of companies they may develop values, or they think it's just this nice side HR thing to do, but they don't carry them all the way through. And I think a lot of companies don't realize the power that values can have if you empower those values and, like you said, use them in constructive ways, whether it's with hiring or dealing with clients, and also to help guide you. Is this, when you're trying to make a decision, is this decision, whether it's values or being on brand or whatever, I think sometimes companies miss the opportunity for values to help you make tough decisions. And I also saw on your site that you talked about in the aftermath about decisions you made about your company based on those values. And for example, the paid time off, that's not something here in Canada we can relate to because it is law, but I thought that really spoke to empathy and honesty, and it really backed up, it put your money where your mouth is in terms of your values. Yeah,
like for example, here in Kentucky, if
or parental leave. Sorry, I meant parental leave is.
Yeah, well, specifically, if a woman is pregnant, we're not obligated to even hold her job, let alone give her time off. And so we felt like we need to put a stake in the ground that we're going to go beyond what we're obligated to do to support our people and help them be the whole human beings that they need to be to do good work here. It's not just what you do here, but it's your whole life. You know, we don't want to draw clear distinctions between. We don't want people to ever feel like they have to like pause their life and then go sit at a desk at Bullhorn for 8 hours and then resume their life. We want it to, we want it to feel like this is part of part of a whole existence. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you're going to get better work from people and happier. I mean, all those things people talk about, but it's really important.
And there's something to be said for somebody who, makes that kind of decision, and they spend the money because it's an expensive decision, but they do it for the better whole when the law doesn't require them to do it.
Right.
That speaks volumes.
Because you may know here in Canada, a woman gets a year off, and you're obligated to hold her job, or it can be split between the mother and the father.
Yeah,
and,
that's great.
Thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show.
Yeah, that was
We'll
really
talk to you later. Thanks for listening to this episode of Agencies Drinking Beer. If you enjoyed it, we'd appreciate it if you rate and or review us on the iTunes Store. If you have a story or lesson to share with other agency owners and managers from around the world, hit us up. Just email Kyle or Kevin at proposify.biz. And also, if you write business proposals and you want to make that process a whole lot easier and more streamlined, check out proposify.biz and sign up for a free 30-day trial. Cheers!